On my plate is my playlist. We welcome actor, comedian, writer, musician, somebody who got me plenty of detentions at school because I copied their comedy routines. Adrian Edmondson, how are you?
Hello, how are you?
I didn't know. I'm great, thank you. I didn't know whether to start with Adrian and then call you Aid. I know you mentioned this in the book, or just go with Charlie because that's what you always wanted.
That's what I tried to get my family to call me, but they refused.
It's too late.
It's my middle name, but it's too late. I am Aid. Or a lot of my friends call me Eddie.
Oh right,
off Edmondson.
Of course.
I mean, there was a kind of idea that when we joined Equity, you can have a different name, and I was going to call myself Eddie Monsoon,
right?
Which became one of my characters, and then actually became one of Jennifer's characters. But I was too late; they'd already put Adrian in.
Now, my first question, by the way, thank you for doing this. I feel like I've grown up with you. I got into trouble a lot at school for mimicking a lot of your, different kind of scenes in The Young Ones and what have you. But I want to ask you, first of all, I read this great quote that you said you judge people on whether they like Laurel and Hardy or not. Is that true? Because I love them.
I mean, I think they're just the fountainhead of all comedy. If you show me any kind of comedy today, anyone who even the ones who think they're revolutionary, and you show me their jokes, I will show you that joke in a Laurel and Hardy episode.
So it all started there.
I mean, it didn't actually start there. It started in an unrecorded world. I think they were just the first people to record it. So they'd obviously seen vaudeville acts that did the jokes. All the jokes are all the same. I once met Spike Milligan in an airport. We'd just been on one of those Irish talk shows together, and it was Dublin Airport, and I started chatting to him because and he was an absolute kind of idol of mine, and I asked him if he'd ever seen any of my stuff, and he said, "Well, yes, I don't watch any new stuff because I know all the jokes." And at the time, I thought he was being a bit rude, but I sort of know what he means. I don't really watch a lot of comedy anymore because I do know a lot of the jokes.
Your first track is Laurel and Hardy. A couple of quick fire questions for you. Do you remember the time when you first realised their brilliance? Was there a moment, a scene, a movie?
There was a show on the television put together by Bob Monkhouse, and it was just lots of old clips of that kind of era of comedy. Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton. But Laurel and Hardy, the ones that spoke to me quite literally, because they were the talkies. I didn't really like the ones that didn't have a soundtrack.
No.
But once they started talking, they were just brilliant from the get go.
Tell me about why you love Laurel and Hardy so much. What is it about them two?
It's a double act. Double acts I've always found much more fascinating than single stand-ups, as it were, just because there's always a dynamic. There's something going on. And I've spent my life in double acts. Most people do, really. You spend one with a partner, your home partner, as it were. And a lot of people have a professional partner, and I've had one or two of those actually. So I think it kind of talks to me about my life.
I read a lot in the book about your childhood, and thinking about it and looking back on it, you were at boarding school. It all seemed kind of, quite brutal. Is there a song around that time that would be?
Let's choose a bit of. I call him Bowie. We can talk about that. Let's choose something off Ziggy Stardust. Let's do Rock and Roll Suicide.
Now, tell me about the Bowie thing, because you mentioned about what you call him. Tell me that.
Yeah, well, I call him Bowie. We all called him Bowie at my school.
So I say Bowie. What's that about?
I don't know. But it's spelt O-W. I mean,
Yes.
That's ow, isn't it? There wasn't a lot of kind of media in those days. And up in the north, we all called him Bowie. And I've seen it. I've seen him being interviewed. I saw him once being interviewed, and the interviewer said, "So is it Bowie or Bowie?" And he said, "Yes."
Make of that what you want.
and he once claimed that he named himself after the knife by the American frontiersman, whose name was Jim Bowie.
No, that's
the correct pronunciation is Bowie,
right.
But he thought it was Bowie. So everyone's got it wrong, and it's not his real name. He's called David Jones. So I mean, you know.
What kind of an impact did he have on you?
He was just I went to a boarding school, and we had a common room. So you know, we all had to listen to the same records, and there had to be some kind of consensus about what was going on the turntable, and Ziggy Stardust was just the kind of beginning and end of most of those arguments. You know, everyone loved it. It was kind of revolution in a soundbite, wasn't it? It was so exciting, visceral, and there was a thing in the middle of the album that said "play at top volume." It was printed on the kind of, the
brilliant
bit of paper in the middle.
It's just such a rebel. You spoke to such a generation.
We thought, do that.
And you must have loved that because
turn that down.
I picked up on the book. Your days, they were quite dark, weren't they? The boarding school days.
I got beaten by the masters, not by the boys. No, they were vicious bullies, and they hit me a lot with sticks and conkers and slippers and whatever they could find, really. It was all stuff that was made illegal a few years after I left, but it was legal at the time, and they got away with it.
I thought there's the story about your dad not wanting to kiss you anymore after 7 and stuff like that. It was quite it was a very kind of strict upbringing, wasn't it? Yeah, there was a kind of I call it the cataclysm when I was sent away at 12 because I've got an older sister and 2 younger brothers, and I was the only one sent away, and I never really got a satisfying answer as to why. I think I was the experiment. I think my sister was older, but she was a girl, so maybe my dad, in his misogynistic way, thought not worth investing in a woman. I kind of messed it up. I didn't get. I didn't even pass my 11 plus. I don't know how I got in. That's amazing, isn't it? And that's such a great story for people listening.
Yeah, and I messed up my O levels, messed up my A levels, got into uni, but on sort of they'd let me in with fairly simple grades, sort of B, C, D, and I couldn't even get those, but they still let me in. Wow. I think it was a kind of weak year. Rik got in through clearing as well, so
amazing to hear. Let's talk about when you arrived in Manchester, because there's a great chapter in the book. It's called Manchester When It Wasn't Cool. Is that right?
Yeah.
Tell me about what Manchester was like. Manchester's a special place, isn't
it? I still go back to Manchester. There's quite a lot of filming happens in Manchester, and when we tour, we get Manchester, and all that kind of Canal Street area was just a load of derelict buildings at the time. Yeah, there was nothing there at all.
I used to live on Canal Street.
The Hacienda wasn't there. There was, everything was. It was we'd just come out of the kind of crisis of the early 70s, and everything was dirty and grim
and industrial.
Yeah. So it was 75 when we turned up there, and out the back of the uni, they'd knocked everything down. The landscape was like the moon. You could see little stumps of old buildings knocking about the place, and there'd be a pub that had been kept as a community asset, but there'd be no community around it.
And yet, despite all of that, wonderful things started to happen. You arrived there, didn't you? Tell me about.
Well, we had it was the drama department, and it was a very small department. There's only 30 people a year, and the course wasn't. You had to turn up for 2 lectures and a tutorial, and that was about it. A week. But they had this thing called the German Church, the Stephen Joseph Studio, and it was a kind of little resource. It was a tiny little studio, and we could do whatever we wanted in this place, and it wouldn't be judged, it wouldn't be marked, it wouldn't go to any sort of ongoing marking system. It was just a place for absolute pure creation. So we spent 3 years just creating stuff. I mean, you couldn't do it these days. My daughter went to the same uni, same department, and everything had changed. You didn't have any of that.
In what way?
Many more lectures and no resources. You had to kind of buy the resource. You had to rent out rehearsal space and stuff.
Not the same, is it?
Because everything's measured now. And you have to kind of get value for money
and this was
in this modern world. But I think the value for money was in letting us have the stuff.
And this was the time that you first met Rik, wasn't it?
Yeah, I met him on the first day there. Saw him on a bus. He was very ostentatiously kind of tapping his number 6 on a packet of fags and on both ends. And I know you only have to do the the unfiltered end, because it's about trapping the tobacco in. So I thought, he's an idiot, and we sort of kind of really got together in the second year when we were trying to get equity cards. We started playing the Band on the Wall in Manchester, an old jazz pub. It's now a rather swanky art centre. And we just did improv, we just tried to fill an hour of pub theatre to try and get these variety contracts so we could get into equity. And then we accidentally became comedians.
Did you know that you were going to be friends for life? Did you feel that? Did you feel a connection when
we
you
did
first
by the
met
end.
him?
Yeah, by the end of it. When we turned out we were the same person, bizarrely.
And he loved Laurel and Hardy as well.
He loved Laurel and Hardy. He loved Waiting for Godot. We each had the same dressing gown that our mums had sent us with. We each had Gorilla by the Bonzo Dog Doo-Dah Band. We both thought Wile E. Coyote was better than Shakespeare. We bonded on a lot of stuff, and I think it was the finding Waiting for Godot to be the funniest thing in the world that separated us from everyone else.
We must talk about the Comedy Store, the comic strip, Dawn French, Ben Elton, Jennifer Saunders, Rik and you. Let's talk about that chapter. How did it all begin? We
sort of arrived in London, and there was no circuit as such. There was no... we tried to get into working men's clubs and things, onto that. There was a kind of circuit going round, but it was full of kind of guys in dicky bows and ruffled shirts telling slightly off-colour jokes. And it wasn't really us, and we weren't really them. They didn't want us. We tried to get in, and they said no. So we had to kind of start our own places to play.
Because there were no venues.
There were no venues. Rik and I turned up in London, and we rented ourselves 12 different church halls and did a tour of London to very few people.
Really?
Yeah. But it sort of got us one bit of newspaper coverage, and that... Then we took that along with us to the Comedy Store, which then set up. Someone set up the Comedy Store, and we started playing there. But the Comedy Store was a great place, very kind of dynamic and everything, but you couldn't earn a living out of it because the people who ran it kept all the money for themselves. So we set up the Comic Strip Club just around the corner, and that was basically us, me and Rik, Peter Richardson and Nigel Planer, Dawn and Jennifer and Alexi Sale. And we started playing that sort of 5 nights a week, and actually became professionals for the first time in our lives. And although we were kind of working and we were professionals and didn't have to do the boring day jobs anymore, it still felt like a party.
Did it?
Yeah, it felt every night felt like, can't believe we're doing this. Can't believe this is what we do for a living.
Something really special was going on, wasn't it? Did you realise that at the time?
Yeah. Well, it felt... I don't know anyone who knows, who except with hindsight, knows where they were going.
Yeah.
So we were just living day to day. A lot of people seem to try and have a plan. We never had a plan. We lived day to day. We'd wake up in the morning and say, what should we do today?
Yeah.
And let's have another party. And it just felt like we were on the front foot and kind of bouncing.
Yeah.
And
would you say that lots of the comedy and the whole vibe of the era came from the darkness that you'd just been through in the 80s? Because the country was in a bad way, wasn't it? Manchester was industrial and dark.
Yeah. I think we were very different to the comedy that existed.
Yeah.
But some of us were overtly political, like Ben Elton and Alexi Sale. But Rik and I we were doing Hysteria. We weren't really doing comedy. We were doing routines that were designed to get people wound up into a kind of sense of hysteria. So you couldn't give our material to anyone else and say, go on and do those jokes, because there weren't any jokes to be done.
Yeah.
It was all about kind of hurting each other. And I remember at the Comic Strip Club, there was he'd introduced me as Sir Adrian Dangerous, and I'd run on and headbutt the microphone and it'd come out of its socket and fall into the audience. And then there was a bit afterwards where I banged my head against the wall, and it was a brick wall. And I discovered that the harder I banged the wall with my head, the bigger the laugh I got. So I just used to, my comedy was banging my head against the wall.
You must have hurt yourself.
Yeah, we did hurt ourselves
badly.
A lot. Later, yeah. I mean, because once we'd been on telly and did all the kind of the fights on telly and the young ones and stuff like that, and Bottom, when we started doing Bottom live, they wanted the same stuff, but we didn't have camera angles to play with, so we often nicked each other around the eyebrows and things like that.
I wondered if the next song we could play the young ones and play your track. Can I first of all ask you? Can we speak about Rik? What kind of person was he?
Rik Mayall was a man who transformed from an uncomplicated, fun-loving charmer into a complicated, fun-loving charmer with those hesitations in.
Amazing.
It was he and this is not a value judgment at all. He just enjoyed fame more than I did. I found it a burden, and I didn't really like being recognised in the street. I found it kind of boring.
Right.
You spent a lot.
It must have changed everything from you, because you were big kind of celebrities in the 80s, weren't you?
I don't think we were. We were on BBC Two. You got to remember. When the young ones.
I was a school kid.
When the first ones first went out, it was just over 1 million viewers.
Right.
It wasn't. By the time we did Bottom, it was 6 million. It was a steady increase. It's a bit like Woodstock. Everyone claims to have been there, and everyone claims to have been there at the first series of the young ones, but they weren't. It was a kind of slow growing thing.
It's interesting. I heard you say when you were in with Graham Norton that you've probably spoken about the young ones more than actually doing the young ones, because there were only 2 series, 14 episodes, wasn't it?
2 series of 6, bit of outdoor filming, bit of dubbing, and a week to make each episode. 14 weeks of my life, less than 0.5% of my life.
It's amazing, isn't it? But I was kind of 6 or 7 or 8 or whatever, and we were quoting, we were singing the song. I was sent out the class.
Well, you see, the song was already when was that? That was 3 or 4 years after the programme.
Yeah.
So they weren't contemporaneous.
Yeah. Tell me about the song. Because of Cliff Richard. How did that happen?
Well, it was the very early days of Comic Relief. And the idea came up to do a single, and that was sort of chosen, and it took a day.
Really?
It took a day to kind of do it, yeah. Maybe 2 days, because maybe a day to make the video, which was pretty rubbish, wasn't it? If you think about it.
But it captured the nation's attention, didn't it? And it was such a defining moment.
Number 1 in 7 countries.
Yeah.
It was extraordinary. Yeah.
Raised a lot of money for charity.
Yeah. We didn't... we sat Cliff down and told him he shouldn't be playing South Africa. And he stopped talking to us.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, it was a strange time. Yeah.
Did anything go wrong during the young ones? We were talking about the kind of the slapstick humour. It was quite violent, actually. When I look at it now, setting fire to beds and smashing windows and stuff.
Yeah.
Did you ever get injured?
We got injured quite a lot, in a minor ways. Not so much on the young ones, because the BBC Special Effects department was much better than any other department we ever found. We eventually turned up at doing Saturday Night Live with the Dangerous Brothers at ITV studios, and they're a lot cheaper. And that's when they set me on fire, and I caught fire.
God, really?
Yeah. We were doing a sketch about doing the towering inferno, and I was going to be the building and be on fire, and
what could go wrong?
Yeah, I know. So they covered my legs with glue and set me on fire, and they said the flames would come up to my waist, but they sort of went over my head.
Wow.
And I'd forgotten my dialogue was help, 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 no, please, I'm on fire, please put me out. And I thought, well, I can't.
You can't say that.
I can't say that because so we've got to have a safe word in case it does go wrong. So we came up with the word aubergine, because it's a word no one ever says. And when I caught fire, I couldn't remember what the safe word was. So I was going, I've forgotten what the safe word is. Is it banana? And they were all going, how brilliantly well improvised.
Oh no, and you're burning, you're on fire.
Yeah. But,
I wondered if we could, for the next track, play, because I love the fact that during the Young Ones you had bands playing, you had music.
Yeah.
You know, I wondered if you could pick one of the most memorable performances.
Ace of Spades by Motorhead, I think, is the best one we ever had on.
Whose idea was that to incorporate music with the show?
It was a budgetary requirement.
Really?
Yeah, we were under the variety department because we had a lot of stunts. And we needed the extra day in the studio, and the only way you could do that was not be in the comedy department, be in the variety, because they had bigger budgets. But their stipulation was it had to have live music in it. You know.
But it worked, didn't it?
But it worked, yeah.
And it became synonymous with the show.
Yeah. We had a good time with people like Lemmy. We sort of developed a relationship with Lemmy, and he was in quite a lot of comic strip things as an actor, you know.
Yeah. Was that as a result of being on your show?
Yeah, that's when we met.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's quite nice, those kind of things that kind of developed.
And as we go into this, do you have a favourite Young Ones episode or a favourite Young Ones scene that you will always remember?
There was a stunt we did when Viv and Rik are sort of fighting each other and running around the house shouting "Virgin" at each other, and we dropped 25 feet in a bed from the sort of rafters of the studio into the kitchen set, and then carried on. It was in one shot, and I do remember that. I remember lying on the bed. It was a kind of metal tray dressed to look like a bed with some cardboard boxes in it, which would supposedly crumple. And it was done live in front of the audience, you know, during the show. And I remember lying on it with Rik, and I was looking at each other going, is this really wise? Is this what we do? And my daughter read the book that I've just written, and she came up to me and said, I never realised that you weren't really a comedian, you were a stuntman.
Yes.
You know, and we were. Yeah, we did a lot of stunts.
Bearing in mind you were doing it in front of an audience, did you just have one go at those things? So that was it. It had to work.
Had to work.
Amazing, isn't it?
And if you look at it carefully, you can see that we're completely winded. But we carry on. Because we were troopers and we were getting a laugh.
Brilliant. Just
we'd do anything for a laugh.
Amazing. Let's play a track around Bottom, shall we? The next era.
Okay.
Have you got something that you would like?
What suits Bottom?
Because that's kind of 90s, isn't it, now we're talking?
Yeah. Yeah. Let's go for Roll Away the Stone by Mott the Hoople, which isn't a track of that time. But Rik had a very kind of... he didn't really like music.
Did he not?
No, so we spent a lot of our lives in a van with a very small record collection of CDs. We had Mott the Hoople, we had Little Richard, and we had a bit of Van Morrison. And that was it, really. And we liked Free as a Bird by the Beatles.
Beautiful.
We got that as a single. Maybe we should play that.
That would sound great. Should we do that?
Yeah. Because there's something about that song that's kind of the way, you know, because it was a tape they'd found, isn't it? And then they sort of added themselves to it. And the way John and Paul... I mean, have you watched that documentary about the making of... the album, you know, and you realise that they just always loved each other.
Yeah,
and I think
it really shone through, didn't it? The camaraderie.
Yeah, and I think we could hear that in Free as a Bird, and you know, anyone in a double act will lie and tell you that it's all roses, but there are moments of tension, and but I think we kind of understood in that song the way they. The way they did love each other, and the way that we loved each other.
I was moved to tears when you talk about Rik and what happened, after his accident and the latter days and stuff. You know, it was it's an extremely emotional story. And I can tell you found it emotional to talk about. But you two really loved each other.
We did, but we're gentlemen of a certain age, and we never said it. You know.
Do you regret that?
What we did used to do was quite obviously love each other's characters. I loved Richie and he loved Eddie, and we used to write for each other's characters and really enjoy each other's characters, you know, and that was a kind of sublimation of our actual love for each other, I think.
You must miss him terribly.
Don't be an idiot.
Of course.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was wonderful to talk to you about it. Okay, random question for you, Aid. Bottom or the Young Ones, or do you love them both, or are they just completely different because different decades, different series?
They're, the Young Ones is early 80s and the Bottom is 90s onwards. They're quite a long way apart. Dangerous Brothers is in between them. But people imagine that we were a double act only, but we did an awful lot of other stuff separately. So we always had a way of, even in the kind of body of work that's called Bottom, which lasted just over 10 years, really, we did loads of other stuff in between. We weren't joined at the hip, like a lot of double acts are.
Was that tough to go and do your separate stuff and being accepted as a? I
think we were both desperate to get away from each other. And just, you've got to have something to come back and write about. It's very hard, Some double acts have other people writing for them. We always wrote for ourselves, and you've got to have some other experiences to kind of talk about. Because writing is basically talking about what's happening in the world, But
you went into some serious roles after that, and was that difficult? Was it a difficult change?
Not really, because I will always say this: Eddie is as much a character as the Count in War and Peace. He's, as you can hear, he's not me.
No,
I don't look or sound like Vivian. There were certain character traits in my kind of student days. I did drive a motorcycle up some stairs once. But and it definitely isn't me.
Yes.
So I've always enjoyed playing roles. I've always enjoyed playing other people because I don't think I've ever been completely happy with who I am. So, I quite like the release, yeah.
Let's talk about your music career, because there's loads to get through this, with Bad News, with Bum Notes, with you joining a band that you absolutely loved. Let's start from the beginning.
I think if you'd got me as a 16-year-old and said, what do you want to be, I would have said rock star.
Yeah.
But when it came to leaving school, there was a kind of pressure to go and study somewhere, and there was no kind of obvious way into the rock and roll world. Nowadays you can study at university, can't you? There are lots of places where you can do this. You can learn electric guitar, as a degree. But
is there like a Taylor Swift course?
Yeah, I'm sure there is.
Going on, isn't it?
And I had a band at school, and had bands at university, and sort of wrote all the music for the Panto and Department Panto and all that stuff. Always kept it going, always a sideline. Bad News, the comic strip episodes and bands that sort of grew out of that kind of love of wanting to be that. We had a band before that with the same four people called Nice Weather. So there was always a kind of ongoing kind of negotiation with the idea of being in a band, but it wasn't really until I joined the Bonzo Dog Doo-Dah Band. That
must have been amazing. That must have been a complete kind of pinch me moment for you being in your favourite band. How did you feel?
I found them at school. I was late to the party, really, because they're really a 60s band. But I found them in the 70s and absolutely loved them. And eventually they had a kind of reunion gig in about the early noughties. And Viv Stanshall was dead, died in the 90s. And so they asked a bunch of us to fill in for Viv. They asked me and Phil Jupitus and Stephen Fry and Bill Bailey and Paul Merton.
Wow.
To kind of fill in on various songs, and we did that. And then they went on tour, and they asked us all to do that, and most of them couldn't do it, but me and Phil could, so we went on tour with them. And then at the end of this dinner, I can't believe it. At the end of the dinner, at the end of the tour, Neil Innes said, and now that we have two new Bonzos, why don't we make a new album? And we just couldn't believe it, that we'd been kind of, we were uber fans, the kind of fans that I have for young ones. Yeah. I was of the Bonzos, and there we were in the band, actually, people in the band. It's bizarre.
Do you have a favourite song of all time, by the way, personally?
It depends what you mean by favourite song of all time. Whether it's something about my life or whether it's just an actual song.
Oh, let's go for both.
Well, I mean, On My Radio by Selector is my favourite song. It's what I put on
We
quite
played earlier,
regularly.
didn't we?
Yeah. The tracks that mean most to me are... We spend a lot of time driving up and down because we live in Devon and our work is mostly in London, and we dragged our kids about in a really pathetic way and ruined their lives by making them travel too much. And we spent a lot of time listening to Disney, so I can recite the whole of Ariel to you if you like. As they got older, we went through the Spice Girls and All Saints, because I've got 3 girls. And then we finally started finding bands that we both liked, that even we liked. So we had Crowded House, and we had the Dixie Chicks. So let's play a bit of Take the Weather With You by Crowded House.
It's a lovely song, this, isn't it? Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming in. It's a pleasure to meet you. And thank you for sharing your great stories, all these wonderful songs as well. What's your life like now?
I wish I knew. I sort of thought I had a handle on it a few years ago when I wrote this book. A sort of set of circumstances came whereby I suddenly felt I understood myself. But life has got very busy again after that, and I can't understand myself when I'm busy.
Right.
I don't know what's going on.
You find it hard to process.
Yeah, it's just a constant buzz in my head.
Was the book a cathartic experience?
Absolutely, yeah. I settled, made a settlement with a lot of things that happened in my past. I'm what's called a Stoic in philosophical terms, which is a bit like cognitive behavioural therapy. In that I've learnt to only worry about things I can affect, not things that have happened. And writing this and writing them down and sort of making them the past has helped in that.
And what's it like at home? You're gonna, your daughter's Jennifer.
Yeah, well, my daughters are all grown up. They're all in their 30s.
Is it a funny house?
It's people imagine that Jennifer and I live in a sitcom, but she spends most of her time sweeping leaves, and I spend most of it growing tomatoes. That's. And then we watch crap telly with our dinner on our knees. It's a normal existence.
And tell me finally about the tour that you're going out. And you do kind of one-man shows, don't you?
I'm doing a tour sort of promoting the book. So it's an audience with me, but it's just me.
Right.
And the audience. There's no intermediary.
So is it questions and answers?
I talk about myself for an hour and read bits from the book, and then I take questions for an hour.
And how's that been?
Oh, it's been rather fun.
Has anyone stumped you? What's the most bizarre question?
No one's asked a really interesting question yet. It's all pretty obvious what they're going to ask. I'm waiting for the really interesting questions to come.
Let's end with a song. I'm going to put you on the spot now. Go on. Adrian Edmondson, what would you like to end? It's your playlist.
All right, we'll have Anarchy in the UK by the Sex Pistols.
Wonderful. Adrian, Charlie, wonderful to meet you. Thank you so much. Thank you.